Well, this ruling just came down. We'll get to Paula Reed after she's able to.
And that was,
read
in
through.
fact, the Assistant Attorney General.
In the meantime, just 2 weeks now into Donald Trump's presidency, a new CBS News poll shows that Americans are sharply divided along partisan lines.
Protests have popped up at airports across the country this past week after the president's travel ban executive order. It's something he had promised on the campaign trail, but how are people reacting now that he's in office?
CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvanto joins us now for a closer look at all of these numbers.
What's up?
How are you guys?
We're doing good.
Good to see you. Friday night.
I got to ask you about this polling because people were there are a lot of people that were saying that they were surprised by President Trump's win. Not the people who were voting for him, obviously. Those people felt that he was going to do well. All those massive crowds that attended his rally, they say to us that the media got it wrong or pundits got it wrong. But what does polling show?
Oh, look, it's a great question because a lot of people looked at that and said, oh, well, maybe the polls weren't talking to Trump voters.
Right.
You know, what really happened was that there weren't as many Trump voters 2 weeks out from the election as there were on Election Day because people changed their minds.
Do you think it's people that changed their minds, Anthony, or that it's not that we weren't talking or the pollers weren't talking to Trump voters, that they weren't being polled?
Nope, they were in there. What happened was we saw an unprecedented shift of undecided voters in Trump's direction, and we also saw his campaign do a terrific job of making sure that his voters turned out. If anything, there were a lot of Democrats who told pollsters that they were going to vote, and then they didn't show up. So there's definitely some place in there to look at how you get those likely voter models. But the overall lesson out of this is, number one, you don't treat polls like predictions because things can always change. There are people on the other end of those numbers, and they are thinking and mulling things over, and that undecided shift was really pronounced. And, you know, and the second part of this is that you don't necessarily take a poll that's 2 weeks out or 1 week out, see that things are tightening, and then say, well, that's where the election's going to end up, because then you look at where the turnout comes and, well, things can be different.
Do you think, though, that there were people out there that didn't want to say they were going to vote for Trump? They just flat out didn't want to say it.
There isn't a lot of evidence for that, only because during the time we were polling Trump voters, they were really proud of it. They were really proud of it, consistently so. In fact, they even often said that they were telling other people to vote for Trump, and that's one test, the fact that they weren't being shy. So that, you know, there's really was this late shift, and when you see, even in the exit polls, when people said, when did you make up your mind? And it was always that day or a couple of days before. So that tightening in the polls that we saw suggests that switch rather than missing votes.
Okay, so before we talk about the latest poll numbers that are out now, there are a lot of Americans, including the President of the United States himself, who throughout his campaign said, don't trust the polls. I'm going to win this thing. His supporters said he's going to win this thing. Now we've got some new polls out. I wonder how difficult it will be for people to not just believe them, but sort of understand what we're doing when we poll and we come out with the numbers that we do.
Sure. Well, look, I mean, there's no turnout model here. This is all of Americans. And every poll is going to have a margin of error. And every poll is subject to change. So the numbers that you see today, just like an election can swing and people can change their minds, okay, well, if X% right now think policy is a good idea or a bad idea, we've obviously seen that people will think differently about it. And, you know, if President Trump goes out and persuades some people or things start to work, that can move those numbers as well. And that, again, that's the big lesson out of it. These are people, and people change their minds.
So let's get to the numbers about this travel ban. Why are they so divided?
Partisanship. You know, what we have seen this year is, unlike past administrations coming in, usually the other party, the losing party, gives the new administration a few months of honeymoon, where their voters, sizable number, go, all right, we'll be optimistic. All right, we'll give them a chance. Well, we have seen Democrats almost uniformly be opposed to everything that President Trump is doing, and so that keeps his numbers low because it's Republicans who really like it, but almost all Democrats are completely opposed. That's behind
But he's
the
also
splits.
come out of the gate so fast. I mean, do you feel as though that some of those numbers are attributed to that? I mean, because the executive orders are just flying off of his desk.
And what the polls show is that those are things checking boxes that his base really wanted.
And his supporters wanted him to do.
Supported exactly what they wanted.
So what do the numbers show about the nomination of Neil Gorsuch for the Supreme Court?
Well, conservatives like it, and conservatives want a conservative justice, and they think that he is one. like most Supreme Court justices, when they're first nominated, America's introduced to this person. So they go, okay, we'll wait and see. And that's, a very sort of rational, steady approach there. So that's what you see. You see these big wait and see numbers. But, Democrats, of course, they wanted at least more moderate judge, and they don't necessarily think that this is one, but that's, that's where they stand.
So the CBS News Poll's first measure of Mr. Trump's performance for president, 40% said that they approved of the job that he was doing. Was this surprising?
Well, it's that partisan split again. We're in an era now where you might see lower approval numbers for a president because you don't get as much of the other party coming over as you might have in past years. So to that extent, it's not surprising given the era. We saw right up until 2016, we saw President Obama also struggle with being able to bring Republicans over to say that they approved of him because the partisanship was split. And that's a broader statement of the times even, and provides the context for what you see for any particular president.
These numbers about the president's approval rating, there are several polls out right now, in fact, this week that are coming out with these approval numbers. Explain to the viewers why they may see some discrepancies between, for example, a CBS News poll and a poll done by somebody else, which may have the president's numbers either higher or lower.
Yeah, well, the CBS News poll is really good. That's the first thing.
There's no bias
so too.
here.
And look, and its accuracy was terrific. The national poll was just terrific in the last election. But anytime you see a poll, it's going to have a margin of error. It's going to have an uncertainty, a certain amount of uncertainty around it, and that's something that every pollster should just be transparent about. The more people you talk to, the smaller that margin of error gets, and if you don't talk to enough, that margin gets wider. Well, you always have to account for that. Things could be a little higher, things could be a little lower, and that's just part of it. So there could be some sampling error. There could also be the way that pollsters have to go about matching their samples to make sure it meets the same numbers as the U.S. Census. That's the goal. So as you talk to more people, you get closer and closer to that goal. Well, polls can vary a little bit here and there. Having said that, Vlad, most of the polls that have come out in these last 2 weeks have been generally consistent. They've generally consistently told that story of splits of partisanship. That's your big takeaway.
And our viewers can find the polls on our CBSNews.com website. All the polls that we're publishing right now, all the stuff that's coming out, CBSNews.com.
Right.
CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvanto. Always good to have you, my friend. Thank you.
Always fun, guys.
Good to see you, Anthony. We're back.